You're listening to Go Fish with Mike Buck on AM 690, The Fishing Answer. This segment is being brought to you by the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council at wpcouncil.org.
Hey,
now,
welcome in.
Troll on in.
Yeah, come on in and catch some. You know, our next guest is Mike Goto. Mike is at the United Fish Agency auction. We've known each other for years. His grandpa is Frank Goto, the go-to guy for years and years. And now it's kind of his turn. And interestingly enough, he has lots of hats to wear just like I do. So he's going to put on his Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council hat for a minute. And first thing, aloha, nice to see you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
Yeah, we've known each other for years, and it's the first time we've done something like this together. Did you have an option? I mean, were you destined to do what you're doing with the family?
Not necessarily. You know, my father never really got into the business as intensely as I have. You know, he became a lawyer, and I thought about doing that as well. But, you know, my grandfather, you know, who's still coming in every day.
Your grandfather is an amazing dude, isn't he? Seriously. He's
something. He's but, you know, he really got me into to come in. And I've been around the auction my whole life, you know, obviously. And when I worked there for a summer, and the more I learned about the industry, the more I started to, you know, really feel like I could do something for it, and I could make a big difference. And honestly, that's kind of why we're here today, I guess, because that progressed all the way into the Westpac Management Council.
Yeah, and I'm going to make that bridge in a minute. But I think what's important is that this model that was designed, this way that we have to getting fish in and getting fish out to the auction is a model that's been adopted and used in a lot of other places, and it's specifically, we did this ourselves. Was it basically based on the Japanese way of gathering and selling fish in Japan?
It was, and it was originally Japanese fishermen that were landing fish and bringing it into Hawaii. The traditional long-line method, which has evolved significantly since that time. It was about maybe 5-10 years after the end of World War II. You know, the boats were kind of grounded in that time, and once they were allowed to go back out, it really was the start of the tuna industry in Hawaii as you know it today.
You know, gang, one of the things that's interesting, we're going to have Mike put on his other hat now, is that this Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council, which is the sponsor of this part of the show, it's way more than that. And what goes on behind there used to be closed doors is really very interesting. And you've heard me speak about it. You've heard a lot of guests talking about it being a bottoms-up organization. It's interesting who the stakeholders are. And now I would think, Mike, the last thing you need is another job. You know, I mean, you guys are really busy 7 days a week, even though the auction is only 6 days a week. What was your original first get-together with now becoming a member of the council?
Well, you know, the more I became involved with United Fishing at the auction, the more I started to realize there's a bigger picture, like you said. I became part of the Hawaii Longline Association, which is kind of the coalition of all the fishermen, seeing the issues they had to go through, and then realizing that the Western Pacific Fishery Management Council was really integral in that process. So when an opportunity arose that there was an open seat on the council for a Hawaii-based member, I was fortunate enough to be able to turn in an application to see if I could get appointed. And you know, it's a really extensive process in that sense. But at the same time, having learned a lot from United Fishing, having learned a lot from working with the vessels directly and the owners and the fishermen, you know, it was obvious to me that it was just pivotal that I became part of that process
We want to think that we're the nucleus of the world in Hawaii, and this council, for those that don't know it, the Western Pacific Region Fishery Management Council is the largest, certainly in respects to landmass, and there are so many different stakeholders, and yet there's so many similarities. I'm blown away, and you must be as well, as to see how many differences and yet how many similarities there are between all the different parts of the fishery that you guys deal with.
That's true, and it's not just Hawaii that Westpac has to deal with. It's all of the U.S. territories in our region. That's American Samoa, that's Guam, and that's the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, the CNMI. So not only do we deal with everything that goes on in the state of Hawaii, which is a lot, we also kind of band together to support each other when it comes to all the issues that the territories have to deal with.
Yeah, and most of the time, folks, we don't really get into a lot of the things that the council does that don't affect us, because we're more like, here, how much is it, and what's meaningful to us. One of the things that was really great and that did get discussed this time, and I think that makes us even more unique, you heard us talk about the Fishers Forum, and thank you, those of you that showed up at this. And I don't know about you, Mike, but I really got my eyes open at this last meeting this last week at what some of the conceptions and misconceptions there were about our fishery, and how lucky we are to have the auction, because the by far the biggest majority of the fish that we put in our face in Hawaii comes through your building.
It is, and to be able to say that this product came into Hawaii at such a high level of scrutiny when it comes to seafood safety is very important to us, because obviously, as a domestic supplier of food to a domestic market, you want to have as high a level of quality control that you can, and we really take pride in that at United Fishing. It's we have a really good HACCP plan. We have a great HACCP manager that really oversees a lot of that, and we record temperatures coming off the boat, coming into the floor, leaving the floor. It's really just vital to anybody who is a consumer.
What I think, Mike, is we take it for granted.
We do.
And one of the reasons, folks, that this whole thing works the way it does is because the auction is so critical of what it's going to sell. When it's coming in the door, it better be at the right temperature and it better be looking right. Otherwise, it's just not going to get sold. And I mean, that sets the bar up for the fishermen. But I think that the listeners may not know, Mike, that we're rather unique. In other words, our quality, we may not do the most volume, the dollars, but our quality is unparalleled anywhere.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and it goes back to the type of product that we're trying to get out there. It's the sashimi grade tuna. Mm-hmm. Going back to what you were saying earlier about a Japanese style system, it's the same thing. It's all based on the highest possible quality of ahi tuna that you can get, and that will determine not only the price that the boat will make on their product that they're bringing in, so that they can keep on doing business. But
you set the bar high. They better bring it in, right?
Yeah, but it makes it better for the consumer as well. They know they're getting something great.
On that subject, the misconception that a lot of people had, some of this came out the other night at the Fishers Forum, was that all the fish coming in, all the longline fish, that all goes to Japan. And in actual fact, most of it stays right here.
That's true. It is a really big misconception that any true export is really from a domestic market to a foreign market, and Japan is one of them, and you can't deny that. But to say a majority of U.S. landed fish in Hawaii goes to foreign markets is completely untrue.
When you see the maps and the diagrams that were in some of the presentations, which we're going to talk about here, showed quite the opposite. I mean, there's a lot of hungry expats and sushi lovers on the West Coast and everything else, but yet here is where the quality is, without question, the top.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And, from everything that we try to do to make sure that happens, that everything that the fishermen do as well, it's all about making sure that whoever is the final consumer of Hawaii landed seafood, that they're getting the best possible quality that they can get.
What did you learn at the forum? I mean, my takeaway was that people realized how our catch was scrutinized and prepared and processed and delivered to us fresh and good. And I really get that people got that. But there were also some misconceptions about how safe our food is or isn't. I mean, the auction food, if you get a fresh piece of fish from United Fish Agency and you eat it in a couple of days, you're in top shape. No question about it. But, boy, we had some other concerns. People think that everything we eat is inspected and certified. It's kind of not.
It's not, and there are so many different regulations out there, both federal and state. So luckily we had panelists that could represent both of those sides. Mm-hmm. But to really understand how the consumer, just the general public will go out and see seafood in their local store and really understand, okay, is this U.S. landed product? Has it gone under all those health and safety regulations? And even beyond that, has it gone through fishing regulations? Was as many protected species that are of concern, was it mitigated by the fishermen themselves when they were out there? U.S. fishermen, really have to undergo all that regulation.
We're so regulated.
We're so regulated, right?
To others, right?
So it's all, and that was the whole. That was really the whole point of the forum, was traceability, as well as seafood safety. And that traceability segment goes to what I was just saying. Was it caught responsibly? And was it taken care of responsibly? Now,
at United Fishing Agency, and you actually were on the cutting edge of this personally, you have this unique system that's constantly getting refined. But when you go down there, and people that have come down there, and as you know, I stopped counting at a couple of thousand how many people I took on a tour through there on a Saturday morning. When they see that barcode on a fish, and they think, well, that's just so that somebody gets paid. That's anything but that, isn't it? I mean, can't somebody trace the fish back to actually what boat it came from?
That's exactly right, Mike. When I initially put this system into the company, it was actually my first project, my first big project.
That's what got you looped in, as a matter of fact.
It did. And but it was at first it was about capturing data, But as time went on, we discovered that it was very important to a lot of different parties, whether federal or state, that we were able to trace all that information, sales, regardless of where that fish came from, when it was sold, what day it was sold, what day it was dropped off, what boat it originally came from, and from there, it's beyond us, but they can still trace it back to when the boat went fishing.
Mike, we just had an example of this on the mainland. 9 states, 53 different people got sick. It was salmonella to do with fish, and it was pointed out scientifically the other night that salmonella is not normal in fish, that we don't have salmonella fish in Hawaii, that something else happened to it. But when you take a look at a sushi bar, and then bless them wherever they are in Minnesota or wherever, when you see a piece of gray tuna on a piece of rice, it's not like ours. I mean, doesn't that system that you put in actually almost prevent that kind of mistake from happening?
Well, it does help in a sense. Obviously, all the other things that the fishermen do to take care of the fish and that we ensure is happening on the floor with temperature icing,
yeah, sure.
That all goes into effect. But obviously, the traceability system is a critical way to be able to expedite information if we ever needed to. Mm-hmm. And as you said, there was an issue with on the U.S. mainland where people got sick, obviously from frozen, and I think they found out it was frozen imported tuna that got cross-contaminated with something else that has salmonella. Because as you just said, salmonella is not a naturally occurring thing in tuna. So
Yeah, and I also noticed something else the other night, and that was sort of interesting to me too, because we know that there's a lot of tricks that are done with fish to make them look fresh or feel fresh, and if you take a look in some markets, you'll see farmed salmon and you'll see fresh salmon, and it looks different. And there was a lot of concern the other day about the confusion between locally caught, say, big eye or yellowfin, and its freshness and its color, and to what guys were called tailpipe fish. I know that there's some misconceptions about this, but what, if anything, is done to the fish that go through United Fish Agency?
Nothing that is unnatural.
Yeah.
It comes in fresh. We're a fresh market, you know. There's some frozen product that comes in, but it's whole frozen fish, you know, because fishermen don't want, if they caught the fish early on their trip, they don't want it to spoil, you know. So maybe they'll throw it into their freezer on the boat. It'll come in frozen, and it'll still be, you know, extremely safe to eat after it thaws out.
Yeah.
But, 99% of our product is fresh. So, it's coming in, naturally. It's a natural product.
A lot of local people, they won't make poke out of frozen fish. I mean, that's not the point. They will if last resort, but there are a lot of, we already know the rules, right? As consumers, we know you don't thaw something and then refreeze it and blah, blah, blah. And yet there's, in some respects, and one of the things that came out before we talk about other things outside of the Fishers Forum was that there's a lot of ignorance out there. They're not being told enough as to what they're buying. That's
true, and the consumer, I guess, is only going to know as much as they're going to try to find out, and even then, it's not necessarily going to be exactly the truth about it. When it comes to things, as you brought up, with gas tuna, gas tuna is tuna that when tuna turns old, it goes from red to brown, and there's a process that United States allows.
Which is delaying
which turns the tuna from brown back to red, just for the presentation sake of it. That doesn't mean that the fish is any fresher, because it's not. It's exactly the same age as it was before it was gassed. And therein lies another problem when it comes to seafood safety. It's really not, taking care of your product. It's just a way that certain people who do that can maintain, can make more money on it.
But did you notice the same thing I did? And that was that a lot of the guys, the naysayers are calling it tailpipe tuna, like it's coming right out of the back of a 34 Ford and getting stuck into the fish. This is carbon monoxide. It's a purer product. And the interesting thing is there's no law against it. And there's not much protection. We don't really know what it's going to do to us.
I'm not sure which other countries ban it, but there are a lot of countries that do not allow this type of product into their markets. And surprisingly and ironically, the U.S. market allows this to come in. And, it's
kind of scary because it's not that you're going to get sick, but you don't know. In other words, how much of it is it going to take? Anyway, I do know that we could spend hours on just that, but I think that we also have maybe a couple of other things that happened as a result of the 163rd meeting of the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council. One of them was to do, in some respects, I think, with what a lot of us like, and there were some ahi issues and some other things. What are some of the things that would be more interesting to local folks?
Well, I think one that there's a simpler one, there's a more complicated one. I guess I'll get into the first one. There's currently some studies and reports coming out on how the state of Hawaii is going to regulate the commercial size limit of small tunas. Now, we at United Fishing, we bring in mostly longline, and these are 100-pound markers. That produce extremely high quality fish. But there are others, especially the local fishermen. If they go out throwing out line and they catch a 4 or 5 pound shibby, that's something that is going to be food. It's not going to be wasted, obviously. But one of the things the council does, working with scientists that are associated with them, is to figure out catching these smaller tunas, is it going to adversely affect the stock size, or just how much fish is out there to be caught in the future. That's always the concern, right? Nowadays is,
well, what I'm worried about, Mike, is this, and I think this is an opportunity where people should stand up and be counted and be honest with their catch reports and some other things, because the decision-making process is based on science, and if it's not complete, it's not complete. So, in other words, do we know that if you take a bunch of 4-pound shibis that they're going to not be able to reproduce? Well, it's kind of a no-brainer. But this is not going to stop the weekend warrior or the guy from going out and catching his little shibi and putting it in the frying pan, is it?
No, but at the same time, there's still market value for it as well.
Sure.
And it goes more to the social aspect, social economic aspect of it. Not everybody can afford 3 pounds of premium.
Not everybody
premium
wants
mahi,
it. Yeah, yeah, really.
There might be a small family that can only afford like a 3-pound size tuna, and they're going to share it with each other, and that's great, if they can do that. As long as it's our responsibility on the council to make sure that is not going to, bringing those size tunas in is not going to adversely affect the species itself. And actually, we were fortunate enough to have one of the science center feds that came in, and he actually gave an on the record statement that said, as far as they knew now, bringing in or cutting out or bringing in these tunas is not going to adversely affect it either way.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. But there's another thing, Mike, and I know that people need to know this, that if anybody knows, you guys know. I mean, you see the size, the cycles that the fish go through. I was surprised, and I know a lot of the people that came to the forum were, this one and the last one, is that we really do have a local ahi population. That it's not all coming in from just some Japan current once or twice a year. So if we I use the word malama that, it'll stay here. And so we have to have some responsibility. Where do you think the number is going to be? Is it going to be 7, 8, 10 pounds? Is it going to go up? What's your gut feeling?
It's hard to say. We're fortunate that we could get a lot of different opinions about this. There were surveys given out to the general public to see what they thought, as well as talking to the federal scientists that give us scientific information. So
the reason I ask, Mike, is that when I've been there, the many, many, many times I've been there, the most fascinating to most people were the big tubs with a lot of shibi in it, and aku and small fish that you say a lot of these families can relate to. Look, don't want sushi bar quality. I want protein for my family that I can afford, and I want it to be local.
And the thing about this issue, Mike, is that, it's been on the table for many years, before I was even on the council. And that was actually brought up during the meeting, that, man, we've been talking, it seems like we've been talking about this every single year. And, I guess the reason why that a decision hadn't been made is because there wasn't any information one way or the other that showed that this was a critical, in the critical area yet. So, and it was very, like I said, very refreshing that the science center came out and publicly said that it wasn't.
We don't know. Is what they said. We're
not
sure.
They knew that it wasn't going to be in danger. Yeah. So,
I think one thing that before we have a time constraint that I really want to talk about a little bit is another area, and that is, we talk about, size, and we talk about quantities, and we talk about these things all the time. One of the most revered fish here are our deep 7, our bottom fish. And I do know that there was a lot of misinformation a couple years back, and a lot of fishermen didn't want to give out information about catch and everything, and they did anyway, and they found out that their quotas remained the same, that the fisheries, but there's been an adjustment. And there's been some realizations that had to take place that came through this council meeting about that. I know that you have the deep 7 that come through the auction, and we wait for those fish. What's your feeling? The quantity has been reduced for next year and further reduced for the following year. Is it complete science? Does it still need to be looked at, and is it irreversible?
Well, the bottom fish issue is a very complex one, as you alluded to, and we have ACL's annual catch limits on these 7 species, obviously, and they are a true commercial value to Hawaii. People come to Hawaii to eat these fish.
Oh yeah,
and they're great, and to really know exactly the exact science of these things, it's just like any other fishery. It's not 100%, and we do what we can to learn more about it. There was a lot of scientific studies. They put bot cams deep into the ocean.
It's getting really cool. We learned that last time. They actually do a grid assessment with cameras, 7 or 8 cameras underwater at one time, and it's good science.
Yeah, it is, but it's still developing. Is the point?
And it's not everywhere yet. Right?
Yeah, and the state and the federal government have done certain things to try to get more information. They close areas off, which is not the most popular decision, but they try to get scientific information out of these areas, and it's kind of a back and forth thing. The fishermen who are out there on the water, they say, why has this area been closed for so long? It's obviously a very popular area. Look at all the fish. Yeah, it's a very popular area.
Look, I got my camera. Look at the fish down there.
And you're driving us into areas where we don't normally go, that are maybe more dangerous to fish, that might not be producing, and it's just the same as longline fish coming to the auction. It's a domestic product that's going to support a domestic market.
And I can tell you from the fishermen that communicate with the program via email, and also that I get when we do the live parts and we get calls, that it gets very, very frustrating because they really want to do this, and yet there's some confusion. The commercial guys, they know that if they don't be careful, that they're going to fish out the place and it's all going to be gone. But a lot of people don't know that this doesn't affect you. If you and I want to go bottom fishing next week and catch some fish and eat it for our family, it doesn't affect us, unless we are commercial fishermen.
That's true.
Or we're going to sell it.
Yeah, I mean the commercial aspect of this, not just of bottom fishing, but of troll fishing,
anything.
Yeah, it's really even though it supports the government system that's regulating it, the Department of Commerce in Washington, it's still hindering U.S. commerce in a way.
Sure.
It's like the Department of Commerce is hindering U.S. commerce.
Well, isn't it like when any catch limit gets to a point, just so that people understand, say for instance, the United Fishing Agency, once the reportable quota has been met, I'm a fisherman, I go out, ignorance of the quota, I bring in a couple of tadai of opaka, you're not going to be able to buy them.
That's true. And
and I'm not going to be able to sell them.
It's true. I mean, so it's not ideal, obviously, for a commercial fisherman who makes his living doing that. He obviously can't earn anything on that anymore. So, yeah, it is troublesome to these fishermen who depend on it, and it is and it kind of offsets the market as well, because just like tuna, if there's no tuna domestically that is brought in, they're going to bring it in from somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's going to be the quality's maybe not the same, and the price may not be the same either.
True.
What about maybe a couple of other takeaways that you think might have been of interest? I know that these meetings are sometimes very laborious and contentious, and most of the average citizen and listener, it doesn't affect them. But there are some other things that did. I know that there's a lot of pushback and concern about maybe making Moanalua Bay, a sanctuary, and some other things. What are some of the other things that you guys discussed at your level that you could share?
Well, the biggest issue and the nearest and dearest to my heart, obviously, is the international regulations on longline tuna take. For those who don't know, the U.S. longline fleet is subject to an international quota. And the U.S. is a part of a large international commission, the Western Central Pacific Fishery Commission. I was fortunate enough to be able to get appointed to that commission last November, and it really is kind of it's like a treaty-based organization that decides together.
In other words, there are some countries that agree on.
Yeah, we decide together, how we're going to manage every fish or everyone's product that gets brought in within the convention area. In this case, it's the Western Central Pacific, so U.S. is involved, Japan, China, Korea, Australia. Anybody that applied to get into the commission is a part of it, and they have a say in how they're managing their fisheries. Now, something like big eye tuna, which is the most important to Hawaii, it's the biggest issue going forward for us, because we're under a quota system, but that quota is based off of fishing that's happening all over the world, not necessarily longline. What's really going on in the international arena is that there's a lot of purse seining happening. Purse seining being those giant boats that kind of net fish And what they're really targeting is small aqua, small skipjack.
A lot of skipjack out of the water.
And where this is ending up is in canned tuna products. They go directly to canneries located all over the world, and in most cases, that's the canned tuna that you will pick up in the store. Now, but what's happening with that is that even though these net boats are going specifically for skipjack, which is still in a healthy state according to global scientists, they're also picking up juvenile big eyes.
Yeah, herein lies the danger, everybody. You got to listen to what Mike says, because you think, all right, that's not going to affect me. But that big eye, that juvenile big eye that gets caught in that net, and it's actually bycatch to them. They're not really after it.
They're not. They don't want to target the big eye, but they'll take it, and it does have commercial value for them. And these purse seiners, they really, they can take in a single trip more than the Hawaii longline feed will take in the entire year.
And I've heard this before. They use the expression "none shall escape." I mean, they got that big pouch going out there, and nothing gets out of there.
Yeah, and we found out even at this meeting that the technology for those fisheries is improving. Just as any technology would. So they're getting more efficient at it. The problem with all this, Mike, is that despite Hawaii being a longline tuna fishery that's more direct toward capturing the big fish, our quota is being determined thousands of nautical miles south. Hawaii, we're above the equator. Majority of this purse seine fishing is happening at or under the equator in the equatorial band. So these small tunas are being taken in that area by
millions of pounds.
By the million, and it's even though it's been proven that to this point that these are two separate stocks: the large fish that the Hawaii fleet catches in the north, and the small tunas that are being caught in the south are there's no connectivity to it. A lot of tagging projects have been done, and we haven't seen any connectivity. But because we're in the same convention area of the ocean, the Western and Central Pacific, it's going to affect our quota in that way, because it's all considered big eye. Sure. It's big eye down here. It's
big eye, not big size, but big eye. That's the species it is. And there's also a mix-up, and maybe one thing to leave people with today, Mike, would be, what's the difference in appearance between a big eye and an ahi? Because a lot of people don't know the difference. It's the same fish to them.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about coming to United Fishing and seeing the auction is that you'll be able to compare all the different types of tuna, because we have at least four main ones, that we showcase every day.
Every day, really.
Between the big eye, the yellowfin tuna, the albacore tuna, and the skipjack or aku, we're able to differentiate them, and they all have a different value, a different market, and it's really cool to see, I think, for anybody. And I always say, everyone, whether you live in Hawaii or not, should come and see the auction once in their life.
Yeah, it'll give you a reason to embrace when you buy a piece of fish at mom and pop store up in Manoa, that it came from the United Fishing Agency, and you can take that fish home and be very, very certain it's going to be good protein for you and your family, and it's going to be fresh.
It will. Yeah. And for anybody that wants some more information, if you want to go online, there's a great website done by nonprofit, the Hawaii Seafood Council. The website is www.hawaii-seafood.org, and it really promotes a lot of what the Hawaii tuna fleet does and how they operate, and we'll give you a good sense of where we're coming from as a domestic U.S. fishery and what we do responsibly.
Was the 163rd meeting of the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council a good experience for you? Are we going in the right direction?
Well, every council meeting that we go through, we have 3 a year, two in Hawaii, one abroad. We always try to get as much as we can out of it. We always try to be optimistic, even though there are situations like the longline tuna quota that are very concerning to us. But from this specific meeting that happened this past week, it was good to know that it's always good to know that there are people, there are groups, scientists that are monitoring this thing, and even though we might be at disadvantage, we go back to being super regulated. At least we have a body of people that can stand up and say,
I was going to say, at least we can talk about it.
Yeah.
There was a time that was pretty a tough deal to do.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike Goto from the United Fisheries Agency and the Western Pacific Regional Fishery Management Council. Thank you, friend.
Thank you.
See you again next time. And thanks also to Jason Radul of DoCare. And, of course, to my buddies running. And those of you that are listening as you're fishing in the Spinner's Ahi Shoot, good luck to you. We'll talk about that next week. If you want to hear something on the show, you know what to do. Drop me a line, the Mike Buck Show at AOL.com. The Mike Buck Show at AOL.com. So, see you next time. In the meantime, tight lines.